direct opening. So you want to own a crime scene cleanup company. At 2:13 in the morning, your phone rings. The police have finished collecting evidence. The medical examiner has left. A property manager is standing outside an apartment with a family member who does not want to go back inside. And now everyone is looking for the person who is supposed to make the property safe again. That person is you. You send 2 technicians, a cargo van, protective equipment, containment supplies, air control equipment, disinfectants, removal tools, and enough regulated waste packaging to handle whatever is behind the door. By sunrise, you may have deployed tens of thousands of dollars in equipment and committed hundreds, or on a larger project, thousands, in direct labor, supplies, disposal, and travel. The customer sees a cleaning crew. You see an emergency restoration project with an unknown scope, an insurance file, a chain of documentation, a waste disposal problem, and a property that cannot be used until your team is finished. And that is why a single job can produce an invoice of several $1,000s. But here is the part that makes this business harder than it looks. You cannot schedule the demand. You cannot build the company by waiting for crime. You cannot create more emergencies when your calendar is empty. And you cannot build a stable company by waiting for a homicide to happen in your zip code. So, where does the money actually come from? How much does it cost to start? And can a local owner turn one van and one phone line into a real business without becoming permanently trapped on call? Let us find out. The name crime scene cleanup is useful because everyone understands it immediately, but it is also misleading. Crime scenes are only one part of the work. A professional biohazard remediation company may respond to unattended deaths, suicides, accidental blood loss, workplace incidents, vehicle contamination, hoarding conditions, infectious material exposure, sewage incidents, animal waste, odor problems, and properties affected by tear gas or other irritants. The exact menu depends on your training, insurance, permits, equipment, and local regulations. That distinction matters because violent crime is too narrow and unpredictable to support most local operators by itself. Your business needs a wider category. The practical category is properties that ordinary cleaning companies are usually not trained, equipped, insured, or willing to restore. That gives you 3 broad levels of operation. This is one van, one owner, and perhaps 1 or 2 technicians who are paid per job or kept on a small guaranteed schedule. You work from a home office or a small industrial storage unit. You answer the phone yourself. You inspect the scene, write the estimate, supervise the work, photograph the affected materials, arrange disposal, and follow up with the customer or insurance adjuster. This is the cheapest version to start. It is also the version in which you have purchased yourself a 24-hour job. Now you have 2 or 3 vehicles, several cross-trained technicians, an office coordinator, and enough coverage to send a crew while another project is still in progress. You can serve a larger metro area. You may take assignments from property managers, restoration contractors, public agencies, hotels, transportation companies, and institutional clients. The 3 operating scales. At this level, your business begins to have value beyond your personal labor, but you also have a new problem. Payroll continues even when the phone does not ring. At this level, the valuable asset is no longer a mop, a respirator, or even a vehicle. It is territory coverage. A regional network can route calls to the nearest crew, maintain a central intake operation, support insurance documentation, negotiate vendor relationships, and build recognition among people who make referrals. National operators advertise around-the-clock coverage through regional offices and mobile units. Franchise systems sell training, procedures, brand recognition, and local territories to operators who do not want to invent the system from zero. BioOne's current franchisor page lists a total investment range in roughly the mid-$100,000 to low $200,000 range, including a substantial franchise fee. Public franchise disclosure summaries also describe ongoing royalties and marketing obligations. The current franchise disclosure document, not a directory or sales page, should control any real investment decision. The franchise does not remove the risk. It changes the kind of risk you are taking. Instead of inventing the system, you pay to enter someone else's. The first economic opening appears when the official response ends. Police officers secure the scene, investigate, collect evidence, and preserve material that may be used in court. They are not a property restoration company. Once the scene has been released, responsibility normally moves back to the person or organization controlling the property, a homeowner, landlord, property manager, business, municipality, or vehicle owner. That handoff creates a strange gap. The customer did not plan to buy your service. They did not compare providers last month. They may not even know this industry exists until the worst possible moment. So the buying process is compressed. The customer wants 3 answers immediately. Can you come now? Can you make the property safe? And who is going to pay for it? That makes speed valuable, but speed alone is not enough. A careless operator can contaminate clean areas, dispose of material incorrectly, fail to protect employees, damage property unnecessarily, or create an invoice that an insurer refuses to support. The customer is not simply purchasing labor. They are purchasing the confidence that the problem will not become larger after the crew arrives. This is the first hidden product in the business. Certainty during a situation with almost no certainty. A normal cleaning company can start with consumer equipment and upgrade later. A biohazard remediation company needs to behave like a professional response operation from its first serious job. For an independent startup, a realistic modeled budget might look like this. That is not an industry average. Independent launch versus franchise. It is a practical model for a company that wants one properly equipped response vehicle and enough cash to survive a slow opening period. You could start for less by using a vehicle you already own, renting specialized equipment, subcontracting waste transportation, and keeping almost no payroll. But every dollar you remove from the startup budget usually reappears as one of 3 things: a slower response, a narrower service menu, or a greater risk that one unpaid insurance claim will leave you without operating cash. The franchise path is more expensive at the front because you are also buying a name, training, software, territory rights, vendor relationships, and operating procedures. BioOne's current franchisor page lists an estimated total investment of approximately $135,000 to $221,000, including a $60,000 initial franchise fee. The page also directs prospective owners to the current franchise disclosure document for complete and up-to-date terms. The ongoing economics matter more than the entry price. Public listings describe a royalty around 7.5% of gross sales, plus brand and local marketing requirements. Gross sales means the fee is calculated before you discover whether a job was actually profitable. So the franchise owner receives a system, but also begins each invoice with several claims already attached to it. Imagine your company receives a call for an unattended death cleanup. You do not quote a flat price from the phone. You need to know how long the property was affected, which rooms are involved, whether material traveled beneath flooring or through walls, whether porous contents must be removed, whether insects or odor have spread, whether the building is occupied, and whether structural materials will need reconstruction. The visible area may be the smallest part of the job. A professional scope can include emergency response and assessment, establishing controlled work zones, protective equipment for every worker and every entry, removal of affected porous materials, detailed cleaning and disinfection of salvageable surfaces, packaging and documentation of regulated waste, air filtration and odor control procedures, equipment decontamination, verification and final documentation, and coordination with a reconstruction contractor. That is why the invoice is not just 8 hours of cleaning. Public pricing examples from specialized operators often place smaller trauma cleanups in the low thousands of dollars, while more complex unattended death, hoarding, or widespread contamination projects can rise into 5 figures. The range is enormous because 2 apartments of the same size can require completely different scopes. One job may affect a section of flooring. Another may require removal through multiple material layers, contents handling, several days of work, and a large volume of regulated waste. The owner earns money from 5 main categories. The customer is paying for workers trained and willing to enter a controlled environment, use protective equipment correctly, and follow a documented process. The Bureau of Labor Statistics does not publish a dedicated wage series for crime scene cleaners. As a rough benchmark, hazardous materials removal workers had a national median wage of about $23.78 per hour in May 2025. That is not a crime scene-specific wage, so it should be treated only as a labor benchmark. Your real labor cost is higher after payroll taxes, workers' compensation, overtime, training time, travel, and the hours spent cleaning equipment after the invoiceable work is finished. A technician may use multiple pairs of gloves, disposable suits, respirator components, absorbent materials, bags, containers, tape, cleaning products, and other single-use supplies during one project. The customer is not paying retail price for a suit. They are paying for a controlled process in which the correct item is available at 2 in the morning and replaced whenever the work plan requires it. Invoice is a defensible scope, not a cleaning fee. Air control machines, filtration devices, specialized vacuums, extraction equipment, lighting, containment systems, and the response vehicle all need to be recovered through billable work.
Equipment does not become free after you buy it.
It requires maintenance, filters, testing, cleaning, storage, and replacement. Contaminated carpet, padding, drywall, furniture, contents, and other porous materials may need to be removed and packaged.
Medical and biohazardous waste regulation in the United States is heavily state-driven.
The EPA specifically directs operators to state environmental and health agencies because medical waste requirements are not controlled by one simple national rule.
You may pay a licensed waste partner for pickup and treatment, or you may need permits and procedures for transport.
Either way, disposal is a cost center before it becomes an invoice line. Many property claims are written with estimating platforms used in the restoration and insurance industries. The owner may spend hours photographing the scene, measuring affected areas, creating line item estimates, answering adjuster questions, proving why material could not be saved, and revising the file. That administrative labor can decide whether the company is paid in 10 days, 90 days, or not at all. So the real revenue engine is not a dramatic scene. It is the conversion of an unpredictable emergency into a defensible scope of work. Let us model a project. A landlord calls after an apartment has been released by authorities. The affected area includes 1 bedroom, part of a hallway, flooring, several contents, and limited contamination beneath the visible surface. Your team responds with 2 technicians. $7,000 sounds extraordinary for 1 apartment. Now look at the direct job economics. For this model, the labor line assumes roughly 30 combined technician hours after travel, setup, active remediation, protective equipment breaks, equipment decontamination, and closeout paperwork are included. At roughly $50 per combined hour after wages, payroll burden, overtime exposure, and employer costs, direct labor reaches about $1,500. That leaves a modeled contribution of $3,550 before company overhead. But company overhead is the part social media videos usually forget. The phone line must be answered all month. Insurance must remain active. The van payment continues. Training must be renewed. Marketing continues when there are no jobs. Your technicians need enough income to remain available, and the owner still has to absorb the time spent on estimates that never become work. A $7,000 invoice is not a $7,000 profit. $7,000 invoice is not profit. It is one burst of revenue supporting an operation that spends most of its life waiting. Suppose you have the equipment. Suppose you can perform the work safely. You still do not have a business. You have a capability. The business begins when people call you before they call someone else. That means your most valuable assets are referral relationships and local search visibility. Potential referral sources include property managers, restoration contractors, funeral homes, victim advocates, insurance professionals, hotels and senior living operators, law enforcement and coroner information lists where permitted, transportation companies, municipal departments, and previous customers. The ethical line is important. You are building awareness, not paying for access to grieving families. The strongest operators become familiar to professionals who need a reliable answer when a difficult situation appears. This creates a local winner-takes-most effect. The first company to answer, communicate calmly, arrive quickly, and produce usable documentation has a major advantage. The second company may never inspect the property. This is why a 24-hour intake system can be more valuable than another expensive machine. It is also why online advertising can become dangerous. Emergency keywords are valuable. Valuable keywords attract restoration companies, lead brokers, franchises, and national brands. You can spend thousands of dollars generating calls that are outside your service area, unrelated to your work, price shopping, or already assigned to another vendor. The owner's job is not only to make the phone ring, it is to create enough qualified calls within a drivable radius that a crew can respond profitably. Density is the hidden variable. A $5,000 job 3 hours away may be worse than a $2,000 job 20 minutes away. Travel consumes labor twice, once going out and once returning with equipment that still needs to be processed. If your territory is too small, demand is unstable. If it is too large, every emergency becomes a road trip. Getting the call solves your first problem. Getting paid creates the next one. Customers often ask whether insurance will pay. Sometimes it will. Homeowners, renters, commercial property, vehicle, or other policies may cover parts of remediation depending on the event, the policy, exclusions, limits, and the required restoration. Crime victim compensation programs may also reimburse certain cleanup expenses. California, for example, currently allows reimbursement of up to $1,709 for qualifying crime scene cleanup performed by a registered practitioner. That can help, but it may cover only a fraction of a complex invoice. Every program has its own eligibility rules, documentation requirements, and payment limits. None of this guarantees your invoice. Response density is the hidden variable. The owner has to separate 3 different questions. Is the loss covered? Is the scope reasonable under the policy? And does the customer remain responsible if the carrier pays less than expected? A weak operator hears insurance job and assumes payment is certain. A strong operator obtains signed authorization, explains responsibility, verifies coverage where possible, documents the property before destructive work, and keeps the customer informed when the claim changes. Cash flow can still be painful. Technicians are paid this week. Waste vendors want payment. The fuel card closes at the end of the month. The insurance file may remain open while an adjuster requests more photographs or challenges a line item. This means working capital is not optional. It is part of the service. Your balance sheet is temporarily financing the customer's emergency. Even if the customer signs and the insurer approves the claim, you still cannot perform the job any way you choose. Before you accept your first job, you need to know which rules attach to your employees, your vehicle, and the waste leaving the property. There is no single national crime scene cleaner license that makes a company compliant everywhere. Instead, the owner has to assemble several overlapping systems. OSHA's blood-borne pathogen standard applies when employees have occupational exposure to blood or other potentially infectious material. OSHA has specifically confirmed that the standard applies to covered cleanup employees working after homicides, suicides, accidents, and unattended deaths. For those employees, the company needs an exposure control plan, training, appropriate protective equipment, engineering and work practice controls, an offer of hepatitis B vaccination, post-exposure evaluation and follow-up, and required records. Hazard communication, respiratory protection, and other workplace rules may also apply, depending on what your technicians do and what they may encounter. HAZWOPER is more conditional. It can apply to workers involved in covered emergency response or post-emergency hazardous substance operations. But OSHA also explains that when a company is performing ordinary cleanup for a homeowner or business after the covered emergency response is ended, HAZWOPER may not apply at all. It is not one universal credential for every residential project. Waste is another layer. The EPA directs operators to state environmental and health departments because medical waste is primarily state-regulated. And the state differences are real. Florida says it does not regulate the cleanup procedure itself, but it does permit biomedical waste generators and register transporters. California requires commercial trauma scene waste management practitioners to register with the state health department. Other jurisdictions may regulate transportation, storage, treatment, business licensing, or disposal without using the same professional title. Then there is the industry standard layer. The IICRC offers a trauma and crime scene technician certification based on the ANSI/IICRCS 540 standard. That certification can demonstrate training and support professional practice. It does not replace federal, state, or local legal requirements. This stack creates a barrier to entry, but not an impenetrable one. The advantage belongs to the owner, who turns compliance into a repeatable operating system rather than a folder opened only after an accident. Compliance can reduce physical exposure. It cannot remove the emotional weight of the work. The obvious risk is physical exposure. The less visible risk is employee retention. This is difficult work performed during other people's worst days. A technician may be physically capable of the task and still discover that the emotional environment is not sustainable. The owner cannot solve that problem by telling employees to become tougher. You need hiring that accurately describes the work, training before exposure, clear authority to stop unsafe work, rotation of difficult assignments, access to support, and a culture in which asking for help is not treated as weakness. Turnover is especially expensive here. A new employee consumes training, protective equipment, supervision, and paid time before becoming fully useful. Then, one early call may convince them to leave. That can trap the owner in the field. Every time staffing fails, you return to the van. No single universal license. Every time you return to the van, sales, referral visits, recruiting, collections, and company building stop. The owner-operator model produces cash. The systems model produces an asset. The transition between them is the hardest part of the business. And this is where the difference between a local job and a scalable company becomes visible. Large operators do not eliminate difficult work. They build enough staffing, intake, and territory coverage that the entire company no longer depends on one owner entering every scene. For years, trauma cleanup looked like a collection of unusual local operators. Then, the category began to consolidate. Aftermath grew into a national biohazard and trauma remediation provider with regional offices and mobile coverage. It was acquired by ServiceMaster and later rebranded as ServiceMaster BioClean. That change is strategically important. A strange niche moved inside a major restoration services organization. The same pattern appears through franchising. Bio1 began franchising in the early 2010s and expanded beyond 100 operating territories. Its current franchisor page markets a home-based model and publishes a startup investment range, but neither the size of the network nor the entry price tells you what an individual owner will earn. The lesson is not a revenue promise. It is network design. That is the lesson. The category can scale, but it scales through territory, intake, trust, procedures, and adjacent services, not through an endless supply of spectacular crime scenes. The national company is not simply better at cleaning, it is better at being reachable across many cities, routing a call, training a crew, documenting the work, and presenting a familiar name during a purchase nobody expected to make. Now, let us test the business with actual assumptions. These are models, not promises. You launch independently with approximately $106,000. You have one van, 2 technicians with limited guaranteed hours, and a broad service area. But your referral network is weak. During an average month, you complete. Now, subtract the monthly operating model. The company loses approximately $2,400 that month before debt service and taxes. The owner can survive by reducing personal income and doing more field labor, but that is not the same as proving the model. The real problem is utilization. You own an emergency operation that is idle too often. Now, imagine the company has been operating long enough to become known among property managers, restoration contractors, hotels, senior living operators, and local professionals. It has enough call volume to complete, now, the operating model. That leaves approximately $8,600 in monthly operating profit before taxes, debt payments, and major equipment replacement. Annualized, that is about $103,000. But do not confuse one strong modeled year with permanent earnings. A few denied claims, a serious employee injury, one vehicle failure, expensive overtime, or a slow quarter can remove much of that profit. A franchise owner would also need to subtract royalty and required marketing fees from the relevant revenue base. The good scenario works because the company averages nearly one meaningful project every 2 or 3 days, not because every project is enormous. At first, the business looks almost too simple. Buy protective suits, buy a van, charge thousands for work other people refuse to do. But the expensive invoice hides an expensive promise. You promise to answer when the call arrives. You promise to send trained people into an uncontrolled situation. You promise to protect the property, your employees, and everyone outside the work zone. You promise to package and route waste correctly. You promise to document the work well enough that a customer, landlord, adjuster, or regulator can understand what happened. And you make those promises before you know exactly what is waiting behind the door. That is why the strongest company is not necessarily the one with the toughest owner or the most dramatic photographs. It is the one with the best intake, the clearest procedures, the most reliable technicians, the strongest local relationships, and enough working capital to survive between emergencies. National scale comes from systems. So, do you want to own a crime scene cleanup company? Then do not think like a cleaner. Think like the operator of a small emergency network. Because you are not really selling the removal of contamination. You are selling the moment when a property can stop being a scene and become a home, a vehicle, or a business again. Final reframe.